All right, welcome back. This is going to be a lot of fun today to the Front Row podcast with Coach Mark Gottfried. And today, I'm so thankful. I've got a guy that has such an amazing career in baseball. Shawn Green was the Dodgers, Mets, Diamondbacks, and Blue Jays, if I think I have that right.
You got it.
And had an amazing career. And very thankful again, Shawn, that you were able to come in and we get to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So talk to me a little bit about this one. I'm going to start off with this question. I was reading a little bit and learned that your father was a college basketball player.
He was. Yeah, he played for a legend. Played for Ray Meyer at DePaul.
That was what I was going to ask you, at DePaul. Yep. So growing up, you've got a dad that obviously understood sports and he had success and he obviously was very good to be a college basketball at DePaul. But what kind of impact did that have on you as a child growing up and then becoming a baseball player?
Yeah, I mean, huge impact. My dad definitely had the biggest impact of anyone. I mean, he grew up without a dad. He was 2 years old when his dad passed away, so it was just him and his mom. And he just turned to sports, and that's kind of what drove him and what fueled him. And even to this day, he's 81 years old. He still coaches kids and absolutely loves it. And if you love sports, particularly baseball, but if you love sports, he loves you, and that's kind of his whole thing. But he, so I lived in San Jose from 5 to 12. And we had, this little track home, this kind of empty backyard. So first thing he did is he put in a basketball, little half court, laid the concrete and put a hoop up. So I was shooting all the time. And then a kid on my Little League team, when I was 9 years old, they had a pitching machine. And we had the rest of our yard was empty. So my dad threw up a net, a little cage, and they moved the machine there. And we'd have practices at our house. So the machine would be sitting on the basketball court. And then in the empty yard, we'd hit. And then a couple years later, when he wasn't on my team anymore, the dad took the machine away, and my dad's like, at this point, I'm kind of addicted to it, and so we got a machine, and that's kind of what happened. I spent a lot more time hitting off the machine than I did shooting baskets, but I did both a lot, and then as a freshman in high school, that's kind of when basketball fell by the wayside for me.
Was there a point for you, maybe that ninth grade year, where you said, okay, if I'm going to get really good at something, I got to maybe lock into one sport, or because a lot of people play multiple sports, and then there's that point where you say, okay, it's time to get serious about one?
I think it was a combination of things. For one, the varsity baseball coach at Tustin High, Vince Brown, was the freshman basketball coach, and I think he really wanted me to focus on baseball, so he wasn't playing me as much as he maybe should have. So I was like kind of the fifth, sixth guy, and I was getting frustrated. But, I think it was partly that, but it was also I started playing in scout leagues and things like that in California, where you have a lot more flexibility on how much baseball you could play. And I started getting attention pretty quickly, and I said, it's time to focus on it. And looking back, we ended up having an incredible basketball program. Tom McCluskey was the coach. I don't know if you know Tom, but our team won state as seniors, and looking from the sidelines, I was a little jealous, but had that happened, I would have missed half the baseball season anyway. So
when you were young, Shawn, and my dad was a coach too. He coached small college basketball. Then he became a Division I basketball coach. Later became an athletic director. And I learned. Sometimes I look back and I don't even realize how much I actually did learn. Because it was just part of your life. You're around somebody where some athletes in their family, they really don't have anybody that's ever played. And so for you, some of the lessons maybe like that your dad, if you had to look back that that God, he taught me this, and maybe it's fundamentals of the game, but also your approach, some of those things. What would those kind of things be maybe from your father? Yeah,
no, he told me what to do. And someone, and it kind of runs through my generations of different family members, is OCD. So I was like, okay, he told me to hit off the tee every day and take X number of swings, and I saw it, boom, 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 I did it. And then he'd tell me, go run some sprints, build your speed up, and I'd do it. But he wasn't like over the top, overbearing, because I wanted to do it. I wanted to get better at a young age, and I was very obsessed. But I think just from a basketball perspective, he was a really good coach. He ended up teaching high school in Chicago in the inner city, and in the early 70s, and he won the city championship. And then when he was coaching me, I was really good defensively, because he was very much fundamentals. He knew how to run a good offense. But shooting, as more than anybody, it's just repetitions. And I'd shoot a lot, but then all of a sudden I got that bat in my hand, and that was, for me, it was a little more fun. So I kept whacking the ball.
Was there a time, Shawn, where you kind of, it's interesting because I asked Jermaine Dye this, we had it on the episode, and his answer was kind of interesting too, but was there a time where, I played college basketball. I got drafted by the Pistons, and there were certain I can look back and say, okay, at kind of this point right here, I started to realize, you know what, I got a chance to do this. I have a chance. Was there ever a point where you started thinking, I might be good enough? I might be good enough to play in the bigs one day?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple different answers. The first one is, I always plan on playing in the big leagues. It wasn't even a thought. So it's a funny little story. When I was in 8th grade at Hughes in Tustin there, I remember sitting in like the little multi-purpose room, and they had every president, of the class, from every every year up on the wall. And I'd just sit there and go, God, what? I think I'm going to run for president. Run for president, because I think it'd be really cool for kids in the future to see a major leaguer on the wall. And it wasn't even like a question in my mind. So I think I had that mentality. But I would say when I first realized that there was a shot, I'm playing in the scout league programs. So it would be all fall, and they would have, I played for the Blue Jays, who ended up drafting me, and they would supply wooden bats, and they could gather up the best kids throughout, from Bakersfield all the way down to San Diego. And they would come out on Saturdays and Sundays, and you'd play until the pitching was gone. So you'd play like 18 innings. And the first year I did it was my sophomore year. And, I'd have to wait 9, 10 innings before they get me in there, and then I go in. But you're facing, the best guys, but then you also are facing, there might be a couple minor league guys or even some big league guys that show up, later in the fall because they want to start getting ready for spring training to get a couple at bats or throw to a couple hitters. And when I started, hitting those guys with wood bats and as a sophomore and junior, I'm like, okay, I could do this.
Interesting. How hard for you personally, but then maybe for other kids too, that decision in baseball when you're drafted and it's the decision to not go to college and go into the minors, and play, and I'm going to pursue this. Or some guys elect and say, you know what, I'm going to go to college. And guys have done well either way. But for you, how hard was that decision for you?
Yeah, that was a really tough decision because I was, my OCD also translated to the classroom, whereas like I was a perfectionist. I had to do really well. So I worked hard in school, and I got a lot of attention from Stanford, and then ultimately signed with Stanford. And at the time, they won the World Series in '88 and '89. And we're talking about, I think I signed with them the fall of '90, right? So they're the best program, and obviously the school speaks for itself academically. So I was planning on going there. And then, I started getting more attention from the professional scouts. And because they're showing up to all your practices. I had Pat Gillick, who's now a Hall of Fame, former general manager, who was at my practice. So I knew there was, going to be some attention when the draft came around. And then, they asked you questions, and my answer was always, I'm planning on going to school, but I'm open to anything, was basically my answer. And the scouts kind of steered away from Stanford kids, because at the time I think there's only 2 or 3 who had ever left them for the draft. And so I think one of them was Billy Beane, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Yeah. So I ended up getting drafted by some of the teams kind of passed. I got drafted 16th pick by the Blue Jays, and then I broke my thumb. I got hit by a pitch in a summer league game like a week or 2 after that. And so I couldn't play anyway. And so they didn't really talk to me for most of the summer. And then I show up at Stanford, and now there's a hard date where you can't sign after, I don't know if it's July 15th or whatever it is. But back then it was when you walk into class. That was, your eligibility was over. And so I was on campus. I went to the first practice, and then the Blue Jays came in with this, ridiculous offer. And I had my, quote unquote advisor, who was really my agent.
Right.
And, I talked to him, and he's like, okay, I'm going to sign. And so my dad says, you got to go like a man. You got to go tell Mark Marquis, go to his office and tell him you're going to sign. And I'm scared to death, right? I'm 18 years old. So as I'm walking over his office, Marquis, because he's kind of panicking. He had lost 2 guys that year after losing 2 or 3 ever. He lost Sean Estes, who had a good big league career, and another guy. And as I'm walking over there, he calls my dad. He's like, what's going on? He said, he's coming over to talk to you right now. And so I get there, and Marquis has me sit in his waiting room for like a half hour, and I'm sweating, I'm like sweating bullets. And I finally get in there, and he was an incredible salesman. I mean, he was the Olympic coach, and I mean, he was a great recruiter. And so I go in and tell him, and he flips me. So then I call my dad, and I say, I'm not signing. He talks me out of it. He says, oh, if you're good enough now, you're gonna be even better in 3 years. You're gonna get more money, and you're gonna have a Stanford. He's completely convinced me.
Yeah.
And And so then I get my dad and my, Jeff Morad, who's my agent. We're all on the phone. He's like, okay, well, let me have you call one of the players that he represented. So I talked to him. He goes, how much are they offering you? And I said, like $700,000. He's like, take it. He's like, every one of us would do the same thing. And so then I called Mark West. I'm not walking in there again.
Face to face once.
That's it. I did my man job, and then now I'm calling. So that was it. And I signed. They still let me stay there, which was great.
How hard? Because if a lot of universities, my oldest son went to Stanford, played football there, and because that degree is so powerful, that had to weigh into it as well. In other words, if you were going to, I'm not even going to mention a school, but a school that maybe doesn't have the academic reputation at Stanford, it might be easier to say, you know what, I'm just going to push this off and I'll get my degree, or I'm going to be there. But talk about that, just with the power of Stanford.
Yeah, no, that was the thing. And well, I was fortunate. I think they changed it after me, actually, is that they let me stay there just as a student. So I went to the fall and winter quarters and then went to spring training. I did that for a couple years. And my attitude was, if this baseball thing doesn't work out, then I'll have at least half of my education done. So that's what I did. And I think now if you sign, they like, okay, you got to go.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's kind of funny looking back at the time. I was really focused on baseball programs more than the academics, but academics was a big part of it. But the schools I went to on recruiting trips was like Arizona State, Miami, Arizona, where's the other one, USC, so kind of a wide range of academic standards at the time. And I ultimately picked Stanford because it was kind of the best of the best in both sides.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it was all about baseball, really. That was the goal, was to be a big leaguer. And the argument on the other side was always, look, if you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school and do all that. If you want to be a baseball player, go right in and learn. And I do think it's changed a lot. Now they focus more on college because it's more of an analytics approach to drafting, and they want more data. Especially, it's hard to compare different high schools if you got some kid in the middle of nowhere versus a kid in California. But I will say I learned the game at a much younger age than had I played in college. I think it's a totally different experience, and I don't regret playing at all.
Were there ever times, Shawn, that because baseball is so different than basketball or football, because the depth of minor league baseball, there's so many guys. You're talking about rookie leagues, A League, Double A, Triple A. You got a lot of people in an organization.
Yep.
Were there ever times for you where you kind of looked around, you went back to the hotel and looked around, and I know I'm good, but God, there's a lot of people. How do I get from here and to get up to the bigs? Were there times for you where you maybe not questioned yourself, but it just overwhelmed with that minor league baseball and the amount of people involved? Yeah,
no, it's a lot, and that's the thing. When you're drafted high, going in that okay, you have every opportunity. So you basically have to not come close to living up to expectations to not move through the system, right? And so I knew I was going to have every opportunity. But yeah, there was so many times, and I was skinny. I was like 170 pounds when I graduated high school, and I was a late bloomer, right? So I'm watching batting practice, and these guys are launching balls, and I'm hitting the warning track or whatever. So I knew I was going to get stronger and all that stuff, but I'm looking around going, geez. And then the game starts, and those guys with the big swings, they're striking out, and I'm putting the ball in play. So, I think that helped me kind of move up. I think I matured at a good pace, where it's like, okay, first year I hit 1 home run, and, at a really hard level, I hit 270. So that was pretty good. I go to Double A and hit 280 with 4 home runs, but I missed like 6 weeks with a broken thumb. And then I go to AAA, and I had a really good year and hit 340 something with 13. So I was progressing, I think, the way they hoped. And it's not like some of the guys that came in, like my teammate was Carlos Delgado, who was just super strong right away and polished, and was hitting 300 with 30 home runs every year in the minor leagues. And he continued and had an amazing career. But it was interesting too. The Blue Jays, a big philosophy of theirs, especially at that time, and it was really Pat Gillick that led it, was to draft like quality people and interesting people, and so they tried to sign Eric Lindros, the Hall of Fame hockey player. They when I was there, Chris Wenke signed the year before me and ended up going back, and he was one of the top quarterback recruits in the country, if not the top, out of high school. signed and then went back to Florida State later and won a Heisman. So, I mean, they liked people that had more than just baseball to bring to the table because they knew that they worked hard in other areas, and they liked athletes who had physicality that they were learning playing other sports as well.
Talk about the first time that you walk out on the field in a Major League Baseball game. Just the feeling of that, the first time that I'm coming out of the dugout and I'm playing. I'm here.
Yeah, so there's different times. So there's spring training at a big league camp, and I'm sitting there next to Dave Winfield, who's, he was in the big leagues before I was born, right? So
you're about an athlete now. You're talking about a big-time athlete.
Big-time athlete, yeah.
Drafted in all three major league sports, by the way, baseball, football, and basketball.
Yeah.
How about that?
No, I know. I mean, he could have been Bo Jackson if they had let him do it, right? I mean, and add basketball to the equation. But, I got guys like him and, Joe Carter, Jack Morris, like these legends, at that time, and still. So I think there was that, and then you get called up. The first time I got called up was September, and it was kind of a contractual thing. So I was up for a couple of weeks. So it was cool, but it didn't feel like I'm here for real. Mm-hmm. And then in '94, I got called up in I think early mid-May, and I remember getting called up. I was doing really well in Syracuse. I was leading the league in hitting, and Bill Buckner was our hitting coach. And I had just broken like maybe a 15 to 20 game hitting streak. It snapped it, and then the next day, I'm taking batting practice. He comes up to me and goes, "Hey, you ready?" And I said, I thought he was talking about the game, maybe because I snapped the hitting streak. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready." And he just kind of smiled, and I didn't really think anything. And then I got scratched from the lineup, and then my heart started racing because that's what happens. You get scratched from the lineup, and there's one reason, when you're leading the league in hitting, yeah. And so they called me in. I went up there, and I got called up, and I was scared. It was stressful. Yeah. And I was up for a month and struggled and had hurt myself, but went back down. And I actually was happy, and guys were making fun of me because I came down. I was so happy to be back with my buddies because I'm up there and I feel like I'm lonely. I'm a kid. I'm 21 years old, I think, and you got all these guys. Everyone's got 10-year-old kids, and I'm just kind of, and I want all my buddies in AAA. And so I was kind of happy to go back and settle in. And then the next year, I think I was definitely mentally ready to be there.
Do you think sometimes, Shawn, because I listen all the time, and again, basketball is beginning to a little bit evolve this way with the G League, where they can take a young player and put him in the G League, or if he's just not playing a lot, he's sitting on the end of the bench, we can put him down, bring him back. But I listen a lot where players, especially in baseball, it's sometimes very helpful, to be. I know it's. It's probably in your mind, like nobody wants to get sent down to the minors, but sometimes guys, for whatever reasons, they'll go down a little bit, especially young players. They'll get a lot of reps, they'll play a lot, and all of a sudden they come back and they're even better sometimes. Would you agree? Like some guys, I guess it's how you approach it maybe when you go down there, that if you're just moping and pouting about it, it's not going to be good, but sometimes it's very helpful for guys.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, I think it's hard as a young player to go up there and sit, right? Because back then, it was a little different culture where there'd be a lot of veteran guys on the bench, so you can learn as you're sitting there. You have, a guy that's played for 15 years that's kind of talking you through things and trying to help. And I think now they replace those guys with young guys who they don't have to pay as much. It's kind of focused more on the salaries of the big stars, right, and skimp in other places. So you can learn from the bench, but I think being out there on the field and getting the reps is so important in baseball. And I think the one challenge with playing in the minor leagues is there's no energy in the crowd, because it's like you're playing in these places and you might have 4,000 people on a big night. And so what they would do, especially the Blue Jays, love to send you to winter ball, and then you go down there and play, and you have. In Venezuela, you wake up in the next morning, they're all betting on the games, all the waiters and stuff, and they're going like this to you, if you blow the game. So you got the pressure, and now you're ready for the big league pressure.
Mm-hmm. In Major League Baseball, because I always go back to basketball, and for more familiar with basketball than anything else, obviously in the NBA. But could you tell as you went from franchise to franchise, and you played for some great franchises and did a lot of winning, but some franchises are just more committed to winning? Like everything about it, you walk in and you have a feel like the facilities and how you travel and, obviously what they're spending on their players, all the things you do. But some organizations, starts with ownership, they're just more committed. We're going to win. And this one is like, I'm not real sure they're that committed. Could you feel that as you moved around the league?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I wish I could have played in this Dodger era that they have right now. Because when I go there, spring training or whatever in the clubhouse, it just feels different than anything I was a part of. But when I first came with Toronto, that was the class organization because they had made, they were above 500 for, 10 years straight and won the World Series 92, 93. Those were the first 2 years I was playing in the minor leagues there. And so our minor leagues were stacked and they flew, better, stayed in nicer hotels. They had a sweet MGM plane, all this stuff. So yeah, I definitely felt it there. And I think one thing that happened, the strike really affected the attendance up there because baseball was more, at the time, is more of like a cult following as opposed to like a true love for baseball. Now I think there is that true love for baseball, but it took a while to get there. Obviously hockey's number one. So I think it took a little wind out of the sails, and that's kind of when my career really started, was 95 full time right after the strike. And then the Dodgers were kind of a transition period, and there was definitely that winning culture, but it was, Fox had owned us, and then there was a sale to McCord, and so when you go through transitions like that, it's a little weird, right? It's the culture's trying to solidify itself, and it's kind of in between those a little bit. And the Mets was a great experience because you're in New York, and if you're winning in New York, there's nothing like it. I mean, everywhere you go, that's all everyone's talking about, and the game starts. If you watch the playoff games, it's first inning, first pitch, ball, the whole crowd's
everything.
Strike, yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, I would encourage you to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. Your involvement in this show allows me to continue to bring you amazing, high-achieving guests. Thank you so much for your support. Talk about, so you go to high school in Tustin, and you get the call that I'm going to the Dodgers. Not the Tigers or not the, it's the Dodgers. How was that feeling for you having, high school baseball right here in Southern California?
No, it was great. I mean, it was a little bit of there's a little manipulation on my end. So kind of what happened there is I just finished my 5th season service time with the Blue Jays, and they told my agent that they were either going to sign me to a long-term deal. I had a really good couple years in a row, or trade me because they had really got burned when Robbie Alomar walked for free agency and went to Baltimore. So, I talked to my agent. The team was up for sale and all this, and we were looking up at the Yankees, we were looking up at the Red Sox. The Orioles were really good, and so it's like, okay, I was worried that they were going to sign me and then not be able to keep Delgado and my good friend and really the best hitter on our team. So there's a lot of question marks, and so I basically said I'm scared to commit to a long-term deal. So I flew back to Toronto a week after the season with my agent, met with Gord Ash, the GM, and we told him this. And then it gave me a little bit of leverage because anyone that's going to give up prospects or whatever is going to say, we want to sign this guy right away, to know we're not going to have the same situation. And so you get a 72-hour window. And so basically we kind of gave them, like, this is the places that I'd prefer to go if we can work it out. And LA was top of the list. And I wanted to go to a big market. LA, New York, both New York teams were Cubs. But LA was home, and it kind of worked because my agent also represented Raul Mondesi, who was the right fielder for the Dodgers, who was a little disgruntled and was ready to move on. So it was kind of a natural, and so he helped orchestrate a lot of that. And and then getting a chance to play her, it was good too because I loved Toronto and didn't want to really be in the AL East and have to go play them, and it just kind of felt weird. So all of a sudden I'm in a totally different league, different, as far away as I could be. And
were you always, Shawn, a home run hitter? Did you view yourself as I'm a home run hitter, or a guy that, in the one year you had 49, obviously, which was amazing with the Dodgers, but if you described yourself as a player, as a hitter, how would you describe yourself? Yeah,
so it's kind of interesting. So I started off not as a home run hitter, and my first 2 years I was platooning, and this could be a whole other show to go through this experience, but my manager didn't like me. And I think a big part of it was there was a little rift between, the front office and him, like kind of the philosophies. And John Olerud, who won a batting title in '93, big, he's like 6'5", beautiful left-handed swing, but he really focused on hitting line drives, up the middle, left field, and they wanted him to be a power hitter because like you're 6'5", and he'd hit like 15 to 25 home runs at the most. And so I was kind of the next John Olerud because I had the similar approach, and he was the guy that I emulated. And so first few years I was platooning, and then the third year I ultimately, and I had good years, but then I got benched, and it was just it was like a whole conflict with the manager and the hitting coach, and they're forcing us to, they traded Olerud to New York Mets, and they were forcing me to like try to pull the ball and all this stuff. So I was on the bench, and then I started, I was kind of into like meditation and that type of stuff. So I started, the hitting coach banned me from the cage. He said, you can't go to the cage without my supervision, because I was trying to sneak in there, because I didn't want, they would do drills where I had to like yank everything to the right side, and I was like trying to hit the ball up the middle and the other way. And so he banned me from the cage, and so I just grabbed my tee and started hitting into the net. And then I started kind of applying some of the meditation stuff that I had been working on in the off season to the like more of a meditation of movement and how my tee work was. And I was just hitting into a net right between the dugout and the clubhouse. And so then after I was asked to be traded, this is a long-winded story. I asked to be traded, and the GM said, okay, well, let me just give me a couple weeks and let's see how it goes. And there's rumors every day. I'm getting traded to St. Louis, getting traded to San Diego, all these rumors. And this is like middle of the season. And so then the GM convinces the manager, Cito Gaston, to play me every day. So look, if we're going to trade him, you have to give him some value. So we're going to put him in every day. And so I've been working on this stuff. I've been kind of tinkering my swing. And all of a sudden I played my first game back. We're facing Greg Maddux. And I hit 2 home runs and had 3 hits. And I just went on a tear. And so then they didn't trade me. They fired the manager at the end of the season. And so the next year I'm playing every day. I'm hitting in the top of the lineup, like second or third. And I start in batting practice, Carlos Delgado, and I start messing around doing this little home run derby to center field. And all of a sudden, we're doing this and betting, and like the hitting coach is involved, and whoever loses each month has to buy dinner for everyone. Right. And so all of a sudden the games are going on, and all of a sudden I'm starting to hit balls out to center field, and then I'm starting to hit balls in like the second deck, and I'm hitting balls to left field. And so basically I kind of taught myself to hit home runs accidentally, and then the next year I hit over 40 home runs. So it was just kind of this weird thing where I kind of aligned my swing, got things fixed, and then sort of just kind of playing around with my buddy, learned how to hit home runs. And it's no one really tells hitters to practice doing it in the right way. We do it to center field. You couldn't pull the ball. You're like, you have to hit home runs to center field, and that's when I learned to stay on the ball.
How about that?
Yeah.
So just for all of our listeners, just so everybody knows, so Shawn, you held the record, Dodgers, single season, home runs in one season. You had 49, and you held that record for 15, 16, maybe not 20. It was
02, yeah, so 22 years.
22 years held that record until Shohei Ohtani rolls in.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other animal, that big old guy, that right there. But that year when you had 49 and you set the record, was there a point where just all of a sudden, because, like as a basketball player, as a shooter, you kind of get in a groove. It's like, the basket looks like it's that big.
Yeah.
I'm going to make everything.
Yeah.
I'm just in that groove. Was there for you a point where all of a sudden, man, I'm just in this groove?
Yeah, for sure. I was pretty streaky, and that was kind of my philosophy, was to just keep doing the work. And I kind of viewed it as like a surfer, where you got to be ready, and then when the wave comes, you ride it, right? Because especially as a hitter, like I'm sure it's the same shooting. It just shows up out of nowhere sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I would say there was probably like 4 stretches in my career where I was like beyond locked in. And there's one in '99 where I felt like if I couldn't keep the ball in the park if I got a pitch to hit. And that was maybe for like, 3 or 4 games. And then in '01, I had a stretch of maybe like 10 games where I hit about 10 home runs. So I had that. Mm-hmm. And then in '02, I had the when I hit the 4 home runs in a game. I had 3 home runs on the season, quarter of the way through the season, and then all of a sudden I just got locked in. I hit 9 home runs in 5 games. So it was just like I felt like it was like I was a passenger almost, and someone else was doing it, and I'm just watching kind of from the shoulder or something. It was bizarre.
Amazing?
Yeah.
As a hitter in baseball, I'm always curious to this. And I asked Jim Abbott, we had Jim Abbott on the show and Jermaine Divet. As the ball is coming out of the pitcher's hands, how quickly are you recognizing, four seams? How quickly? Like right away? Can you see it as it's coming out of their hand?
Yeah, I think it just depends on how well you're feeling, right? If you're if you're seeing the ball really well, it slows down a lot, and you see it right away, and you feel like you have all day to hit it. And you could tell by the way a guy takes pitches. You watch, big games, you see a guy not even budge on a nasty pitch. He's seeing the ball really well. And as a pitcher, if you're a good pitcher, you see that, and you're like, okay, I know to be careful with this guy because he's not even budging at that. But one thing that I was big on, I learned this in Toronto. Actually, Cito was the manager that was really good at it and kind of pushed it through the system. And Carlos Delgado, Robbie Alomar. So we were good at watching pitchers tip their pitches. So in the same way, a poker player can read tells. Then I got really good at it. I got obsessed with it. And even today, if I'm watching a game on TV, I can't help but watching, the tempo. Like a lot of times pitchers will, subconsciously go faster with everything when they're throwing something slow because they're trying to speed up the hitter. So they move a little faster and vice versa. A lot of times their glove might move a little bit. Or like Greg Maddux, I could see, this much of his hand went over his head if it was hard, and it was like this if it was soft. So I could see those types of things. And so then when that's the case, before he leaves his hand, and then you're in great shape.
And you're just ready.
Yeah, but like I would kind of look in areas. So if I was sitting, I also, especially when I was hitting home runs in my better years, I wasn't going to get a lot of fastballs over the plate to hit. They would, in and out, up and in, down and away, and all that. But the pitch they would throw down the middle of the plate would be a changeup if it was a righty. Lefties didn't throw lefties changeup as much. So if I was facing a guy, every time I got into certain counts, I kept, a little database, and I knew, okay, 1-0's a count and 2-1, those are the same count for me. So if I'm facing a guy who likes to throw his changeup in hitters' counts because he wants to get back in the count, and he's going to try to fool me with speed, then I'm going to sit on it. Just like in playing blackjack, I'm not going to say, I'm going to hit 16 this time I'm not going to hit 16. It's like, okay, I'm going to sit all day, 1-0 and 2-1 on a changeup. And I would say when I was hitting well, if he threw it for a strike, I probably 50-50, I was going to hit it out because it was like batting practice.
Yeah. How much was scouting? Has it evolved now? I guess with technology and the iPads and everything in the dugouts, but scouting, in your era when you played, it was probably just, everybody scouted, I'm sure, but it started to get more sophisticated?
Yeah, it started as we started beginning, we'd have VHS tapes,
right.
And there's a guy, Captain Video is his name in Toronto, and he would he'd pull your tape in and put tape out, and you have the game tape, and you have all these he's working them all, and then it evolved to having the little mouse, and you're clicking on all your at bats and seeing everything, and now it's I can't even imagine, but I didn't like having too much of the data, so I didn't want to know. This pitcher throws 82% fastballs,
right.
First pitch and this percentage, because I felt like it put me in the wrong side of my brain. I wanted to be in the right side of my brain, the creative side, as opposed to the analytical side. So, yeah, I was just more, okay, if I get in a hitter's count, I'm going to sit on changeup because I knew he liked to throw it in those counts. It's those things like that were more not as, I guess, specific and mathematical that I liked. And I'm a math kind of guy, but I just felt like it was just too hard to be in that flow state when you're analyzing what's the count here, and trying to do that.
How familiar did you get then through your period in the bigs with each pitcher? You don't know all of them, but for the most part, you mentioned like Greg Maddux and some other guys that played in that time where you started to really know them. Like, okay, I know.
Oh yeah.
I know them, and then you got to deal with the bullpen late in the games.
Yeah.
Now you got guys coming in maybe for an inning, right-handed, left-handed, depends on what it is, but just that knowledge. Okay, I know this guy. I know what he likes to throw. I know he likes to throw me. He's not going to give me this. He's going to, if he's going to try to keep me off balance. How much of that with just your opponent, that pitcher? Because it's him against you.
That's the fun part.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. So I would say, because you played about 19 times within your division, each team you played about 19 times. So you know those guys really, really well. And what's funny about that, and I always, tell people when there's a matchup in the postseason within the division, it's a little different now because there's only maybe 13 games, but it's still a lot. You're not as like I wasn't as intimidated by facing Randy Johnson or Curt Schilling because I faced them 3 or 4 times a year, and they both tipped their pitches too, which was nice. But so you see them a lot, but then you face a guy outside your division, like go face Roy Oswald or Tim Hudson, and they have great stuff as well, and it was a lot harder, right? So you get comfortable with the guys you see, but then on the flip side, I'd face the Diamondbacks, and I didn't mind facing Randy and Curt because I knew what they were throwing, but also they pitched in a way that wasn't that worked with my approach. Mm-hmm. Like they stayed away more and then soft stuff, but the number 3 pitcher was Miguel Batista, and he threw a good cutter, and a guy with a good right-handed cutter coming in, I couldn't hit. So I could know like Mario Rivera was the hardest guy I ever faced. I knew it was coming every time, but I couldn't hit it. Mm. And even switch hitters would hit right-handed against him because it was just such a hard pitch to hit. So anyone with a good cutter was going to be trouble, and it's kind of what happens. You get even no matter how well you're playing or how poorly you're playing, the matchups mean a lot, and it's more that and you go in there, you don't want to try to change everything. Like if I'm facing Rivera and I'm trying to pull off the ball and like to get the bat to it, that could put me in a slump. So you got to just kind of take your medicine. If it's a guy you just try to battle and see if you can pull something off, but you don't want to start changing things and messing up your swing.
Answer this one for me, because I'm a baseball fan. I love baseball, and I've always been. And but in baseball, I see the shifts a lot of times. Now they put the rule in where you can't put all 4 guys on one side of second base. Only 2 guys on each side. But still, it's a very dominant shift. I mean, they have shifted, and sometimes batters still have a hard time, hitting it in that. They're still going. I guess with analytics, just their swing. And there's so much analytics now, especially I go in basketball, and as a coach, I liked it, but then I didn't like it. I used to have this saying, have a hunch, bet a bunch, and analytics would screw me up sometimes because it's too much. But in baseball, I guess maybe the question is, I don't want you to laugh at my question, but why can't hitters hit balls away from the shift more often? Because as I'm watching, just as I'm Joe fan up there, I'm like, hit it down the third base line.
Yeah, no,
the third baseman's he's over by second base.
I say the same thing. No, we'd face Barry Bonds 19 times a year, and the shift was huge, but he was going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. So why is he going to bunt a ball down the third baseline or slap it down the third baseline? We would have loved him to do that, right? Because it means he's not hitting the ball at the ballpark. But no, I think it's definitely changed a lot. I don't love what the analytics have done to the hitting particularly. And I think the pitching too. I think now guys are just rearing back because the data says that a 98 mile an hour fastball is down the middle is going to have more success than 93 mile an hour fastball that's hitting the corners. So guys are just rearing back, and then they'll throw 2 less innings maybe as a starter, go 4 innings, and they're out. So I think, I don't know, I looking back, there was such a kind of craftsman type approach as a hitter. Like guys talk to each other, and hey, I'd play against Manny Ramirez. Like, hey man, why don't you go back to hitting the ball? He's on the Indians. I'm on the Guardians. I'm on the Blue Jays. Like, hey, make sure you hit the ball over there, because you talk hitting all the time. And it seems like now it's all about what's my launch angle. Look at the computer as opposed to talking to these great hitters that you have around you all the time.
Mm-hmm. Here's one for you, Shawn. So I played basketball at Alabama, and I held for years the record most 3-pointers in a game, and I still hold the record for the best three-point shooting percentage all time in the season. But my record of most threes in a game, it was 8. I made 8 in one game when I played. And I held the record for years and years and years. And I always knew at some point somebody's gonna blow by that one, especially in basketball, how they shoot the 3 so much now. Everybody just shoots it. When I played, we didn't shoot it as much. So you're holding the record, and you got 49 homers. And there have been a couple times, I think Cody Bellinger became close. Yeah. I think got 43 or 45 maybe.
He was 47.
47. Yeah. But then we mentioned earlier, here comes this freak of a guy named Shohei Ohtani. And it's kind of inevitable that at some point he's going to make a run because he's just such a good hitter. But when they passed my record, I was happy, but I was kind of like, it still was my record.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being honest for you. Being honest. So here, you've held that record for 22 years. And then this year, Ohtani, goes past it and gets 54. I think he ended up with the regular season, 56, 54. But how was that for you, watching that as he's approaching your record and then he's passing your record?
Well, obviously you prefer to hold the record, and it's nicer to hold the record than not hold a record. But if you're going to have someone pass it, like who better? He's the greatest player who's ever lived, right? I mean, no one else. Yeah, maybe there's other guys who they'd been given the opportunity. They could have been a stud pitcher and hitter. It just wasn't a thing. But, he's completely dominant. I mean, he's top 2 hitters right now in this league. I would say him and Judge, right? And then in terms of pitching, he's probably, if he was healthy, he's probably like top 5, right? So to have someone like that is pretty incredible. And then the stolen bases is crazy to me. Like, I can't believe a guy that big can be that successful and steal that many bases. I mean, he's like got thrown out 4 times out of 50 something. So yeah, I mean, I think if anyone's going to do it, he was the perfect guy. And I enjoyed watching. I think the 50-50 part of it is what made it like, it's hard not to pull for a guy to go 50-50, right?
Yeah,
so. I knew it was going to happen, and he would have done it last year with the Angels. He would have hit 50. I mean, he hit 44, 45, and he missed 6 weeks of the season. That's so, right. It was in there. It wasn't like he had this, epiphany this year. He's been doing it, for several years now.
When you watch him, and I don't want to get off the subject, but I am interested in your opinion. When you watch him and his demeanor at the plate, he just seems like, well, first of all, he seems like a great teammate. I'm not in the dugout, but just his attitude and his smile, and he just seems very likable and all that.
He does.
But at the plate, he just seems very stoic, and he also seems like you just can't get him off his game. Like, he just seems to me like he may strike out 3 or 4 times in a row, but he's going to stay in there from a fan. But just his demeanor in that, does that stand out to you? Like, I'm just Joe fan, but anyway, it really does to me.
No, I am at this point too, right? So, no, he carries himself great, and he swings really hard, right? And he's a big guy, but he hits the ball a long way, right? I mean, it's
silly.
It's crazy. Yeah. And like, even that home run, against the Mets went over the foul pole. It's crazy. But no, he's a special hitter, just putting everything else aside, what he can do. And he has, what I like his swing. It's not the type of swing I would have taught. It's like a lot of the swings now are coming from underneath, but it works, and it makes a lot of sense because he keeps his hands back and gets that leverage that he has as a big, lanky guy, and utilizes it. So he doesn't swing it he doesn't swing a ton of bad pitches. Sometimes you can get him with a slider down and in or something like that, but he keeps his hands back pretty well, and he's going to be a great hitter for a long time.
His demeanor to me, I like watching him. It's hard not to be a fan of his because he just seems that way. But, Shawn, you ended up, you're in your All-Star game twice, Gold Glove. But then for all of us, there comes a point when it ends, and then for you, I think it was 2008 maybe, 2008
07 was the last year playing, yeah.
And how hard is that? How hard, because you've been playing baseball your whole life, since you're a little kid in the backyard. And then you get to that point. Was there, how did you come to that for you to say, you know what, I think it's time?
Yeah, so I'd always planned on being done when my daughter started kindergarten, my older daughter. And so that's kind of the way it played out. I think looking back, sometimes I'm like, I should have played a couple more years. I had some good opportunities to keep playing, but they were far from California, Midwest, East Coast. And I think it makes it a little harder. Like, my good friend Carlos Delgado, he blew out his hip and he tried to come back, and then he had to end up having his hip replaced, and so that was it. So I think there's more closure when you have a situation where it's you just either physically done or you just can't get a job and you're done. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's like, okay, well, if I want to put up the kind of numbers to have even a thought of the Hall of Fame, I'd have to play 7 or 8 more years. If I'm at an age now where if I have a bad week, then it's like, oh, he's getting old and his bat's getting slow, and so you're on the bench. So it's just like I was kind of getting tired. It was already starting to happen for a year or two of that, and so I was like, do I want to? And I think I just kind of lost a little bit of that fight, And I'm a family guy. I hated being away from when the kids are born, and so that's kind of my nature. So yeah, I think it took a couple years to kind of shake that, because it's like, your body physically, especially such a long year, like when January rolls around, I'd naturally start like gaining weight, because it's like I'd always try to go into spring training because I knew I was going to lose a bunch of weight in spring training. I try to put a little extra fat on it. Now I'm not playing anymore. I'm putting fat on in January. It's just kind of weird. And then another thing that I always kind of found weird is the years, the days and months just kind of roll together once I stopped playing. Whereas before, baseball is very seasonal. It's like it's spring. And then you're outside all the time. It's the end of summer, it's the fall starting, you can feel in the air. But now it's just like everything sort of rolls together into one big year. Mm-hmm. So I think some of those things were kind of weird transitions, but now it's been a long time, and it feels like a different person that played.
One thing I want to ask you, and I admire you so much for this, and I remember this actually, and I think it was when I think it was when you were at the Mets, but you can correct me. But when I first heard about when you decided, because of your faith, as your Jewish faith, that you weren't going to play on Yom Kippur. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people and fans like, come on, man, you got to play. But for you, the value system that you had, like that was instilled in you. And just talk about that in that decision, because that's hard. We had some guys stand up in basketball again, like with the COVID, the vaccine. They had a belief. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that was their belief. They stood up for it, and they took some criticism for it. I'm sure you probably did as well. You took a lot of criticism at times. And just talk about the decision for you, because that's very important.
Yeah, that's a good question. I appreciate you saying that. But it was a challenging decision. So it happened 3 times. So Yom Kippur goes sundown to sundown. And the first time it conflicted was 0-1. And so it was going to miss 2 games against the Giants. It was a Friday night and a Saturday, and I kind of went back and forth. I got advice from people that I respect, and really it came down to a friend of mine, Joe, said, you got to do what's most consistent with your beliefs. Forget what everyone else wants. And I was at the time, there weren't a lot of Jewish athletes, so I was the guy, right? I had to, I felt like. And I wasn't bar mitzvahed, I wasn't super religious, but I did feel like a strong connection to that identity, as a lot of Jewish people do. And every city I went to, there'd be Jewish media, or there'd be Jewish fans come up to me saying stuff in Yiddish or Hebrew that I had no idea what they were saying, but I just thank you. And so I felt that strong connection there. And so what I ended up doing is playing the Giants. We're about 2 or 3 games behind the Giants, and it's in September, right? Middle of September. So I ended up playing the first day and sitting the second day, because I said I just want to just show that it's important to me, and miss one of the games. But I felt like it'd be hypocritical to miss both games as someone who's not particularly, Orthodox or anything like that. And there wasn't much buzz around it or anything. And the reason why I learned later was it was 9/11 just happened, and no one could care whether or not I'm sitting or playing in a game. But and the reason I say I learned later is because then the same thing happened in 2004. Now we're 2 or 3 games up, and we're playing the Giants again, same deal. And all of a sudden it became a big topic. I did the same thing. And talk shows outside of sports are talking about missing work for religious reasons, and it's like more controversy. And so I wasn't really expecting that. And then same thing again in 2007, I guess it was 2007 with the Mets. And at that point, especially in New York, a lot of Jewish fans. Mets have a ton of Jewish fans. It was well received at that point, but it was a challenging decision. But I even asked Koufax, because he'd be at spring training most springs, and asked him what he thought. He's like, hey, it's this. I did it because it was important to me, and you do what's important to you. And that's kind of how he is.
And I would think that most people would talk about you two guys as probably the most prominent baseball guys, Jewish baseball players ever. It's nice to be.
Hank Greenberg's up there.
Hank
too.
Greenberg, but it's nice to be. There's other things you've done a lot of great things in your life, but to be mentioned with Sandy Koufax, that's not bad.
No, it's great. No, he's unbelievable. Such a the Jewish word is mensch. Just a quality guy, and I was honored to get a chance to meet him, because he's every Jewish adults idol, right?
Yeah.
But no, it is. And I was having played in that era, and there was a couple Jewish players, and I think there's been some great ones since I played. There's Max Fried's, great pitcher. Ryan Braun's mom's or dad's Jewish. Ian Kinsler had a great career. So there's been some really good players, but to be kind of just in that conversation is definitely an honor.
Shawn, have you had, you've done such a good job, so you retire from baseball, and what I have found with professional athletes a lot of times is the transition after playing into something else. And you have a software company that's doing great in Major League Baseball, pro sports, NBA, NFL. But that transition, because a lot of guys struggle. They struggle to transition, and they lose their identity. And then they really struggle in life because they can't. They're not in that same position they were in where there's a lot of attention around them. They go places, everybody knows who they are, and then all of a sudden when they're done playing, they just kind of fade away. Some guys struggle with that, but you seem to do a really good job and then transitioning into some business opportunities too for you. How has that been for you?
Yeah, no, it's been fun. I mean, it's kind of funny. You bring a lot of the sports stuff into your business. So I'm lucky when I started Greenfly, my cousin, who's a brilliant guy, he was Daniel Kirshner, he's president of Harvard Law Review, and had recently moved out to LA. We grew up, an hour apart in the Bay Area, and before we moved down here, and he had moved out to LA to work at Activision Blizzard, like the right hand man of the CEO. And so I was just kind of messing around with this concept, and what I brought from baseball is I knew I didn't like to be the lead guy. Like even in Toronto, I liked having Delgado. In LA, it was nice when Sheffield was there. And I wanted to be the wingman. And that's kind of what happened. He eventually got excited about what I was doing, came over, really reconfigured the opportunity of our business. And so he's the guy to credit. But I liked being his sounding board and still am his sounding board and let him drive it. But it's, I've learned a lot. I wanted to do something completely outside of sports just because I'm interested in different things. And, I didn't want to coach, even though I love, sharing the kind of knowledge that I gained, but it's just being away from the family. That's the only reason I wouldn't want to coach. And doing the TV stuff, it's fun for me to dabble in it, but I didn't want the big commitment. So, I just thought, starting something always was really interesting to me. I love the tech stuff. And that's just kind of what happened. Unfortunately, I have a smart cousin that's been able to build a great business, and I kind of go along for the ride.
If I was a teammate of yours or maybe somebody else, maybe I didn't even play with you, but I'm an athlete, and I came and I said, Shawn, I need some advice because I'm struggling. I can't. And I've had a couple guys in basketball I've had a couple to this day, I think in their 50s or 60s that still struggle because that was their identity. That's who they were. But if that was me and I came to you, I said, Shawn, man, I just need some help. I'm struggling here, and, man, I can't figure it out. I played for my whole life. I played 10 or 15 years in the bigs, and, man, I can't. What kind of things would you kind of say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think it depends a lot on, what that person's career, if it's, excuse me, something where they don't have to work anymore, they have the money, then it's like, okay, you have this freedom to do whatever you want. You got to find different passions. Obviously, you can, focus on, a hobby. You can get really into fishing or golf. You could, get into some charity work. You can get into your church or your whatever. So I think it's what makes you passionate, right? And if it's someone who, still, most people that leave sports, they still need to work, right? It's not, everyone thinks that you played a few years in a professional team that you're set for life, and that's just not usually the case. So in those people, it's like, okay, try to leverage what you've already built, right? You've built this, people want to be around you in business or different things, and even if you have to go and almost, be like an intern and to learn, a career path or whatever, you just dive in and start over again and just kind of swallow your pride and just, have your ears open and your mouth shut and learn something new.
Shawn, everybody in here in Newport Beach, and, I met you at a high school basketball game a year ago, and then, but people, I've mentioned to people, I'm getting Shawn Green's going to come on my podcast. every person that knows you that I've talked to talks about what a great person you are. And so the character and your value system, and now with your family, I'm sure it's the same thing. You got a wonderful wife, but looking back, kind of that character that was built over the years for you, I would imagine starts with your parents.
For sure. Yeah, no, great parent. My mom's, like the ultimate Jewish mother, always, are you safe? Everything okay? Always like anything I need, and cooking. My dad always loved when I come home because he get to eat a meal at home. So whatever I need. And my dad, as I said, was, he's always not only taught me how to play, but always my biggest supporter. If I was struggling in the big leagues, even at, 30 years old, he's the guy that I'd call and get his take on things. And no, I think, and that's, they modeled for me how I wanted to be a parent as well. And so my wife, Lindsay, and I have tried to, be the same with our girls. And, you just kind of try to keep passing it along, and hopefully, they do the same with theirs. But, I think it definitely all starts at home and having that support.
Yeah. Well, this has been phenomenal, Shawn. You're one of the great players to ever play, and I'm a Dodger diehard nut, and I actually remember you more with the Dodgers than anybody else because I've always been a Dodger fan. But anyway, man, congratulations on a great career, and then obviously transitioning out of baseball into business, which has been really good for you. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people struggle with that, and so you've done just a great job with that. But anyway, man, I've enjoyed having you on the show, and I hope to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. Great show.
Thank you. A lot of fun. Shawn Green.